Alright, here is another one of my cars, and this is obviously not a buggy. It's a CR01 Tamiya rock crawler that's been modified quite a bit by me. It's a fun car, fun truck, but obviously it's old tech. It's not doesn't have the best steering. It doesn't have the best center of gravity. It's not that strong, but it does okay, and I think it'll hold up for a while with what I've done to it. So I am running it with my Noble. I'm not using the knob to steer the rear, but it does have four-wheel steer, and I just have it set up in modes. So I'll show you the steering. It's front steer, rear steer, crab steer, which is very useful for this truck, as well as your typical four-wheel steer. And that's kind of really the only trick that this thing has. There's no overdrive or underdrive or drag brake, or what would you call dig. There is a drag brake because it's running Hobbywing 1080, so it does have that. It's running two servos, those same 35 blue case kilogram servos with a BEC. So it's got some good torque. I did make kind of a custom roll cage because I didn't want to put a body on it because this thing's was falling over all the time. So let me shut it down and talk about some of the mods that it has.
Signal lost. Signal lost.
So it is running the XL, the Pro Line Swampers TSL SX G8 compound and they're about 5 3/4 inch tall, 2.2 aluminum beadlocks. So the big thing about this is it's narrowed. The frame is narrowed. The frame rails used to run on the outside of these side plates, which I've redesigned. In the stock form, this frame sits outside of the side plates that come with it, and kind of make this thing too wide. And based on the fact that I could move them inward, I could also drop them down, lowering the center of gravity of this thing, which was extremely critical to make it more capable. So what I did have to do after I dropped that frame down, I built some standoffs that retain the stock cantilever suspension and coil springs, but just allow it to go up. So basically the frame sits lower and everything on the frame is lower, like the battery, all the electronics. That's pretty much all that's in there. We still do have some space between the servo and the frame, so we get quite a bit of articulation. I did have to take out the sway bars that go in between. They're like torsion sway bars. They go in between the cantilever mechanisms on the standard truck, but because I raised it up, it's in the way. The frame is now in the way, so there is no sway bar. So what I'm going to do is put some heavier weight in the shock, see if that helps, because it is pretty flexible. It is too flexible. I can pull the springs out of the buckets if the suspension gets dropped and there's some jacking effect. It will pull the springs apart. So we need some limiting straps. Stock axles, stock transmission. I am running a 13-tooth pinion on there, and that's basically a planetary gear with an input spur and pinion. So this transmission creates so the transmission and the axle ratios come out to approximately 60 to 1 with that pinion gear. there's some conflicting information on Tamiya's sites, some of the sites that state what the ratio is. I think they say it's about 45 to 1 in that range, with the stock pinion, which I think is a 20 tooth. So I have it calculated out on a spreadsheet, but I don't have that with me now. But I can tell you it's a 60 to 1, which you need for these big tires if you want to have some sort of creep slow control, and it does. The motor in this is a 20 turn Radon Reedy 5-slot. I was running the CR tuned, which is a great motor. Very good motor. Just want a little bit more smoothness. Because I did try to run a 55 turn Trailmaster 540 and it was just too slow. I think the kV rating on that is about 1,000 per volt, which does make it go slow, but then you really have no, even on 3S, you really don't have any burst speed. So this 5-slot 20 turn, although is a low kV, it is a bit higher. No, I think it's 1,500 kV. You know, I can't keep these numbers straight in my head sometimes. I think it's a little lower kV than the 35 turn, but it's smooth and it does have a decent punch. So that being said, I did design these side plates to allow me to move the suspension arms around a little bit, and because I dropped the frame down, these also needed to be shortened. If this thing's sitting fully laden, there's a 2.5 inch clearance from the ground up to the bottom of the skid plate, and that skid plate also is customized, so I tried to eliminate all those rough edges that Tamiya had on their design. Also running brass drag links, steering crossover links, and upper and lower control arms. The upper arms are triangulated down to the top of the axle, and the lower control arms are triangulated a little out from the skid plate to the axle. And I did bring these arms closer together. They had a much wider gap than what's on here now. This way, in between, these upper arms were much higher up because they were sitting on top of the servo, axle mounted servo bracket, which I believe changes the roll center, and I believe you want the roll center to be as low as possible in order so that you're more stable side hilling and whatnot. So we are running servo on axle, and I couldn't get these links parallel. I don't think it matters all that much. They don't move that far, so because we don't have that much travel. This is the rear end of the vehicle, and I did do aluminum knuckles and inner C's, which I think actually limit the travel, the steering travel a little bit. But I ground them down in the front to get more. I think it's like I get 35 degrees of travel. The rear is probably around 20, 25. Not enough. But because it's four-wheel steering, I just left the rear as it is. In the front, I've maximized it. These just have dog bones. These are not running universal shafts, so you can only go so far with them anyway. But they are the strengthened ones. Then these are spooled axles, the Tamiya parts. I did have to make some basically spacers or brackets to go onto the steering arms so that I could lengthen my drag link. And what this does, because it moves the mounting location out farther away from the steering pivot, it gives it some Ackerman so you don't lose. So your inside tire is at least parallel with your outside tire, which is better than the way it comes. It's kind of like a clodbuster where the steering Ackerman is backwards, and you basically have to, you get less steering on the inside of the turn than on the outside, so you're basically plowing your wheels around. So I tried to correct that the best I could. I could go a little bit more. Let me turn it around, but it's let's see if you can see. So that's what your steering radius looks like on this thing. It's nothing spectacular, and the rear is not as good, but I did grind down these knuckles where the steering arms touch in here to gain back a little bit of steering. So that works. I did put some lead weights in different locations on the front of this axle, kind of right here and kind of one above the axle, just to get a little bit more forward weight bias. It's running the Tamiya metal drive shafts. You gotta have those because you'll just bend up the plastic ones like the first time you take this thing out. If you have one, you probably already know that. And I also designed these brackets for the servo to axle mounts to get the servo down as low as I can so I could maintain some clearance for suspension travel. And like I said, if you can see in here, I flipped the mounting location to below the plate to get those arms closer together instead of above. And it seems to be doing what it needs to do. What else? What else is going on here? Like I said, I kept the cantilever suspension because I do like to keep. You know, it is a Tamiya. You know, it's not going to be like a comp vehicle. So I wanted to keep all the elements of it that kind of make it unique. This truck flexes so much though that it can rub up on the suspension right here. It does rub, especially when you turn, it'll hit. But that's extreme. That's in extreme circumstances. So yeah, this truck is fun to drive. It's very capable. It's not much of a, let's say, climber or side hiller, but the changes that I've made to this have significantly improved its ability to do those things. Because these are not portals or straight axles, I like to have the big tall tires so I get ground clearance. And so that's why I had to gear this thing down as low as I could get it. One of the issues though is the motor, fitting a motor in here, if I can show it at all. Yeah, this motor comes very close, the end bell comes very close to these control arms, so and it can only go in so far. I think a 13-tooth pinion is the smallest pinion I can run without it hitting as it approaches the spur gear, but it also, I don't think I could run a bigger pinion because it would then, the motor would be pushed up against that control arm. So there's probably some changes that I could do, but it's working for now. I like the setup. If I need more speed, I could run 3S, 2S. I could run also. The vehicle crawls really well, but you don't have that power burst ability. And I could change the motor. I don't think I could run a 550 in this, which wouldn't fit unless I move this mounting location for this control arm, which would get in the way of the shocks. I'd have to move the shocks, so I'm just going to leave it. And plus a closed long, 540 closed end bell, it might not fit either. So this motor is a shoehorn fit. So I'll probably stick with that form factor if I ever change the motor in the future. I think I did break this truck once. I got this thing, I was running this thing on a wall in front of my house, and there was a cable line and it wrapped around a wheel, and I was trying to get out of it, and it had so much torque that it broke the pin in the dog bone. Luckily I was able to heat it, push it out, put a new pin in. Haven't had an issue since, but I did stock up on some extra parts for this thing because it's so old. I have gear sets, planetary gears, and I have axle shaft sets, and I do have one pinion gear and ring and pinion gear set aside. They're they seem to be holding up okay. They are wearing. They're that, that cast Tamiya material, that metal material you see on all kinds of gears, and they're very fine gears. So I was a little concerned that they weren't going to hold up. But I don't run this thing all that often, and I can replace them if I need to, because I have seen them break online, seen people break them. Other than that, I'm using the plastic gears in the transmission. I did buy the steel Planets gears, but I haven't upgraded them yet. It's kind of a mission to pull the transmission out. You have to basically, the way it is now, it's easier. You pull these 4 screws out, you disconnect the drive shafts, and you can pull the whole transmission and motor assembly up, and then just unplug the wires. So it's actually easier to work on now than it was. So I do have a few videos of this thing on my personal YouTube channel, and I could probably make a new video at some point, put it on this RC Bench channel. But yeah, this I was obsessed with making this thing, function a little bit better, because it was the only crawler I had. Everybody's into crawling right now, so although it is probably doesn't fit into any sort of class, it wouldn't really qualify in a stock class, because it's got servo and axle, it's got real big tires, doesn't have a body. It's just fun to play around with and experiment and learn how you can change performance of these vehicles. Yeah. Oh, one last thing, I am running wheel spacers, because these are deep. These wheels kind of a deep offset, or a shallow offset, I should say, and so I think I'm running a 15 millimeter wheel spacer, 15 or 20 millimeter wheel spacers, hex standoffs. So let's fire it up one more time, and let's see if I'll show you if it can crawl. See how slow it can go. I haven't run this in a while, and actually this is 3S, so it's not going to be as slow as it could go. Let's see. That's about as slow as I can get it to go. I can hold it though. It doesn't have a huge amount of torque at that low speed, but it does okay. I love the crab steer. Gets you out a lot of problems. It almost acts like it extends the wheelbase for some reason, because I'm able to climb up kind of some 90-degree wall obstacles in crab steer mode, and otherwise it's very difficult to get up those. It's like a stair step, maybe like a 10-inch stair step. Yeah, it creeps pretty good, and it's not gonna. You're not gonna want to do a trail run with this, because you'll have this motor, maxed out the whole time. You probably burn the thing out on 3S. If you're pegging the throttle the whole time. But yeah. It does understeer, sorry, a little bit, because there's no overdrive, and the steering isn't that great at the angle, so you do have to utilize this 4-wheel steering quite a bit to get this thing maneuvered around. And it's if I don't know if this is going to come across on camera, but it's real flexy, too flexy, and it can get you in trouble. But other than that, I don't know. I haven't weighed the distribution front to rear of the weight of this thing. It does have some crazy little bit of torque twist going on. And I think I am going to make some anti-foams for these big tires, because when you're turning and it's understeering, you get a lot of sidewall deflection on these tires. So that may be something to work on over the winter. Any questions, let me know. And I haven't asked this before, but please like and subscribe, and I'll keep trying to put out more content like this. If you guys like it, let me know. Thanks again.